And I think it's what you do over time with those tools in your toolkit that creates something special. So the things that I've done, you think that they're special. It depends. I think it's all a matter of perspective. Some people, they wouldn't agree with how you perceive who I am or what I bring. And so the value proposition that I have, I think it reflects on what you're trying to achieve with a show or a platform that is really championing the building of character and resolve. And I think one of the simplest ways to put it is a book from @medl called "The Power of One More." I don't know if you all read that, but the, um, it's a fantastic way to look at how a normal person can do on abnormal things.
Everybody, welcome back to Fast Friends. This is an exciting one. And if you're getting tired of hearing me say that, well, too bad. This is how we are. We're exciting. Our next guest is somebody who I classify not only just as a friend, not only somebody who taught me what speed was, but someone who I really look up to as an inspiration and a leader and a hero and a model of really what it meant to be a high achiever. This person is going to be one of our best shows ever, because it's just about expanding past rowing and really looking at trying to honor those who keep us safe. And with no further ado, I'd like to introduce the captain of the Northeastern rowing team when I was a freshman, the one and only Scott Fentress. Scott, thanks for being here, man.
Dan, thank you. I appreciate that. That's too warm a welcome. I'm not deserved, but appreciate that. It's good to be here.
Yeah, dude. And it wouldn't be a Fast Friends episode if Justin didn't present why you're here from our standpoint and from why the crowd needs to know why you're here. So, Justin, give him the Fast Friends intro, please.
Yeah, of course. No, Scott, thank you for being on. Obviously, long awaited to have this show. We're on different time zones. We're on different continents. But we made it happen. So just to give the audience a bit of a flavor of, who's Scott. So Scott is currently the CTF 66 Deputy Commander in his respective unit. We'll get to what that unit is in a second, but just a little bit of background before he got there. Scott is a Northeastern University graduate, as Dan alluded to, in mechanical engineering. He's a world champion rower. He was on the U.S. national team. He's a Northeastern University Athletic Hall of Fame inductee, and he also is a Navy SEAL Bud Class 242 honor graduate, where he is currently part of the Navy SEALs. Scott's had a ton of different experiences within the SEALs. Basically SEAL teams, special boat teams, special recon teams, major deployments in Iraq, Afghanistan, East Africa, Philippines, Black Sea, different leadership roles, being the deputy commander of special ops in Afghanistan, flag aide to the chief of the naval operations, congressional liaison, commanding officer, special reconnaissance team, and currently, as I mentioned, he's a deputy commander, Task Force 66 of the U.S. 6th Fleet, which is based in Italy. So on top of all that, Scott is married with his wife, Nikki, and has 2 daughters. So a pretty amazing, quick bio, but obviously Scott's done a lot beyond rowing. Certainly we appreciate, what he's done beyond rowing, but I think that, we're going to jump around, but just to give, again, the audience a quick flavor of who is Scott and who are we talking to today, one and only Scott Fentress on board, Fast Friends. So we are here. We're ready to rock.
Awesome. Justin, thank you for that very extensive introduction. Again, I think I could have consolidated that down to 1 or 2 words. So you give me, again, far too much credit.
No worries. I'll let Dan kind of take it from here. We'll jump right into it. But again, I think there's going to be a lot of depth and breadth to the episode. I think that it'll be super cool to unpack it. And I think that we'll just jump right into it if you're good to go, Scott.
I'm good to go. Thanks. Appreciate it, Justin.
So, Scotty, yeah. I love when we have guests on that are also fans of the show. It means a lot that you support us, and it just shows you how you're the consummate teammate. But you know what's coming in a certain way, and I think it's really important for us to know, why do you think you're here?
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I have watched the show. I think it's a phenomenal platform. It's a great show. So I've had some time to think about that question, and it's a very easy answer for me. And it's clearly to get somebody that's a lot better looking than you are, Dan. Yeah, because I would be I am sorry, but like we we got to be honest, man. You are ugly, and no, I don't know how this team like deals with you on a daily basis. Um, no, no, man. So really the I ask myself that question why on everything. I mean, it's like one of the most important questions. And being this show, I really unpacked it from the actual name that you guys spent a lot of in capital investment, and you put a lot of intellectual investment and even just the name. And the name says it all. Like metal, the word where it comes from 700 years ago or whatever it was when it was first introduced, and it meant the same thing as what its metallic version is. So I think about what it is that you are all trying to develop, and whether that's developing steel, like you're developing character, and that's something that I've had a minute to think about and really develop on my own. Um, and I, I'm not anybody special. I'm a guy next door, and but I've been able to put some tools in the toolkit. We all develop our own toolkits, and I think it's what you do over time with those tools in your toolkit that creates something special. So, the things that I've done, you think that they're special. It depends. I think it's all a matter of perspective. Some people they wouldn't agree with how you perceive who I am or what I bring. And so the value proposition that I have, I think it reflects on what you're trying to achieve with a show or a platform that is really championing the building of character and resolve. And I think one of the simplest ways to put it is in a book from Ed Milet called "The Power of One More." I don't know if you all have read that, but the it's a fantastic way to look at how a normal person can do on abnormal things. Um, and the bio that you just mentioned, Justin, is just a reflection of somebody normal. I'm just a normal guy going along a path. But I've had a plan A, which is kind of like a vision, and my plan B, and I'm stealing this from another friend of mine who's a coach. And my plan B is always just to go after plan A. And I think that simplifies like what it is that I have done. I think it's something that is harmonic, harmonizes with the show that you have. I think you are trying to develop an inspirational model, and something that is assimilable by the common person, the man or woman, boy or girl, to aspire and achieve incredible things. The talent that you have that I'm interfacing with right now is world class. Um, and so I am humbled to be uh, to be called to share anything that I have with you. And so very long answer to a way to thank you. And I think again, just simplifying like what I brought to the table. It's something that I think is assimilable to folks because they can relate. Nobody's hyper normal. Aside from people like Jocko Willink or Dave Goggins and Steve Gadd. Like we aspire to be good, and we aspire to be great. And you guys have an amazing um, tenure to be able to look at like other people that are doing things right. So thanks. Appreciate that. Over to you
I mean,
guys.
that's pretty incredible that you just summed up and gave a lot of detail to something that would you say you're an uncommon man with an uncommon desire to succeed. I don't know if you've heard that line before.
I have, but there's nothing uncommon about me, you know. And I look at other people who are world class, and are they so uncommon? You know, and I challenge you. You know that.
Yeah, no, that's that. But that's why I ask, because I think I know that you're in the credo, right? It's a common man with an uncommon desire to succeed. But it's, you know, the way that you just articulated, and the way that humility is paramount to the narrative as we start the show, is that it's really impressive to see that there's just these exceptional things that Justin explained that you did, and the way that you're describing our cohort. It's a really unifying thing that I think you've articulated better than most guests, just out the gate, which is, yeah, this is a tool. Like, everyone has a toolbox. These are all tools that we have used because none of us, in a lot of ways, thought we were special, but we desired to do special things, and especially with others. And I think that the way that you just kind of set that stage for like why we're here is like, yeah, we're going to brag a little bit, right? Like, I have a good friend who's a Navy SEAL on my show, and I have a bunch of Olympians and world-class athletes and CMOs on my show. And I use the word my show because that's how everyone's supposed to say it, right? If you're on the show, it's your show. And like, you just knock that out of the park, man. Like, the real reason why I think you're here is because I just couldn't wait to be better than you at Northeastern. So, I mean, I appreciate,
it didn't take you too long.
So I think that's the really important thing is like, yes, you are here because you are trying to provide a set of tools that other people can use. Anybody, right? The foundation of the Mettle Factory is not to be on the top of Mount Olympus or the peak. It's like, here's the base. It's the base of Mount Olympus, and here's a toolbox. Start trying to climb up, and if you fall back down, grab another tool from the toolbox. And I really appreciate that you came in here to share those tools. So thank you.
Man, no, absolutely. Yeah, thanks.
Just
sorry,
to
go ahead, Justin.
No, you're good, man. Amazing. Thank you for the accolades. You know, obviously super humbled to hear that. You know, we work hard on the show, so I appreciate it. Wanted to go back though, just even rewind before your bio. So I talked a lot about your, you know, I would say your 18-year-old plus self, but I know nothing about, and obviously I personally know you mostly through Dan and through a picture that I used to see in the boathouse on a wall that was in black and white. That was it. And we'll get into like where I first read your name later in the show. But one of the questions I guess I have to help us set context is like, where are you from? Like, how did you even get to Northeastern? Obviously, you know, engineering degree. Like, talk to us a quick minute just about like, where's Scott from? Like, what's his origin story almost of like, hey, I was a sibling of 5 or 1 or none or whatever it may be. Just quick context. I think it'd be good, and then we'll springboard off there.
You bet. I'll try to I'll try to use the word quick.
Yeah, sure.
To give you some background. And so I came from a very humble but very proud family. We grew up, my brother and I, to my parents in Colorado. That's where I was born and raised. My dad was a Marine Corps sergeant. I don't think he ever stopped being one. And which is, again, there's some pros and cons to that. My brother, he's 2 years older than I am. Was my hero for my entire life. He was always better, smarter at everything that we did, and I think that created a little bit of a competitive edge that carried with me for the next 50 years. And we had we didn't have much growing up. I feel like it was very simple back then. In a very small town in Colorado, in northern Colorado, most people have never even heard of it. My dad ended up he retired. He medically retired out of the Marines. Worked for a computer manufacturing plant at Hewlett Packard, and because he was just ridiculously smart, and still is. So I don't know what happened to me. I fell a long way away from that tree. Um, but so I was always tiny. I was much smaller than my peers. I was like a late developer. To give you an example, in seventh grade, I wrestled at 75 pounds. I was a scrawny little rascal. And I think I graduated high school at a whopping 116 pounds. Um, and 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 I think I always felt I had to prove myself. I wasn't gifted in any capacity. I had to work on things that that just normally came hard. I think because of my lightweight, I was tiny. I could run. I could run like the wind because my legs. I was like 6 feet tall, 100 pounds. Of course, I could run. And and it, I, I struggled in sports, whether that was swimming or I played basketball. I was a wrestler, and I didn't have like I was very late developing. And so when we moved around, we moved to a school where I feel like everybody had gone through puberty, and I didn't start shaving until I was 25. So puberty wasn't even on the horizon. I was weak, and trying to wrestle with fully developed men is tough, and I got spanked, and I got really, uh, I learned to deal with failure and defeat, and I worked on it all the time. If there's one thing I've done is just I identify vulnerabilities and weaknesses and just work on it. My dad worked on me, um, and he didn't have to work on my brother. My brother was big and strong and smart. It was, and he and still is, um, and and so I felt like I was always behind the eight ball. I had a lot to catch up. Um, Now that may have been a gift in the long run. You go back to that power one thing. It's like I've always had to do one more. You know what? My brother, I wanted to be big, kind of like my brother, and he's like, hey, why don't you just have to eat as much as you can every single chance you get? You know what I did for 30 years? I ate as much as I could every single meal. And and you do that over a course of decades, and it works. Like simple thing, like simple like that. And then I became much bigger than my brother. And then I just like start eating the shit out of it. I was like, I could tie him into a pretzel. But it took me decades to do. You know, and I love it. Hopefully he'll get to see this someday. And man, I'd love for him to be on the show. That guy, he's a real hero. He drove submarines, for a living. But who does that? And and so my background, I learned other things. I was a musician. My mom, she taught us piano when we were very young, and I didn't know why I hated it. Um, Man, it's so frustrating, just to do music lessons when you don't really understand like why you're doing it.
Mhm.
You don't understand if you have a talent or not when you're that age, and um, but I did it, and just did it and did it, and year after year, the piano lesson I got, and I was like, whoa. Then eventually you get into school band, and they're like, what instrument do you want to play? And I was like, well, I'm kind of tired of the piano. Can I play the drums? And they're like, sure. Why don't you play the drums? You know what? I played the drums, and that's what I did really well because it was something that I could do, and I could just practice, and I just did that for 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day. I just did that all the time. God bless my neighbors. Small town now. We're living in this. Yeah, their drums are loud. I didn't, you don't realize that when you're, 13, 14, 15, and, um, and music became a passion. And then uh, I started going into bands, and bands started, we had a guy that used to play for 311. This guitarist was just unbelievably talented. Um, and he taught us, and now we're, later in life, and I realized those lessons that I learned in my infancy, and through my development, those years, like now I'm like a really good drummer, and we were performing. It's funny because playing bands now in a college town in Fort Collins, Colorado State University, and for a couple of years, like we used to we've been opening band for all the other bands in the town, big name college bands that you probably never heard of. But eventually, we would play and play, and we got better and better and better, and we really started to kind of define, hone what it was that we did, and and no kidding, like I remember the day when we had to publish these programs, and we had to market our little show that we played in this huge house in downtown Fort Collins, Colorado, and we were the premier band, and all the other bands that we used to open with were opening for us. And I was like, oh my gosh, and we made a lot of money, you know, for just side hustling these, in these shows, rock and roll, and that was like the life, and I illustrate that, just to define a point of when you do things repetition, you don't really understand why, or you finally, over time, you develop a love for it or a passion, and then it becomes like a real thing. And I was ready. I was ready to quit school. I was at Colorado State University. I was ready to quit because we got contacted by Cruise Records, they were doing record deals for like bands like All, and others, and again, they were going to take us on a regional tour, and I was ready to leave my college education to go with these guys that we developed this bond with, and go tour and be musicians, and that was going to be that. Now I was kicked out of the band because I wasn't smoking, and I was like complete straight edge. And so was that a failure? I don't know. I wasn't doing illicit substances, and that seems to be pretty common with like a lot of the people that would just come and hang out with us. And so it was just sort of the environment. I was at the same time I was advocating for the military, to get into the military, and so I was straight edge, and that just was incompatible with the rest of the band. It said, hey man, we got to go with this other guy. He's more the way they worded it, he's more musically focused. Good luck. I was like, oh man, my heart broke, and I'm like, man, I failed. And now what do I do? And well, I'm gonna do the military thing. So I went full speed military. And before we get to the military, I want to talk about a couple of other things that I've glossed over, but I want to capture, because I think it's an important part of the story. Because when I was young, I apologize to my dad, but he didn't believe in me. Like my dad didn't believe in me. He didn't think I would be a good officer. He didn't think I'd be a good special operations. He didn't think I'd be, good, like a good, I wanted to be a Marine Force Recon. And he's like, no, you don't have what it takes. Oh, I want to be a Navy SEAL. Well, you're not cut from and maybe he was right. I don't know. But when I was young, I had really influential people who said things to me. When you're young, you're very easily influenced. And there were a couple of individuals that came into my life, and they said, you could do whatever you want, and one of them was one of my dad's work friends. And I remember he said something to me. He's like, you could be in the Olympics. And I was like, what do you mean? Like what event? Like gymnastics? And he's like, no, you could go in whatever capacity. If you wanted to be a swimmer, you could be an Olympic swimmer. You have the mindset for it. And I was like, what? No way. It was the first time that somebody said something that I was like, it kind of shot, it rang my bell. Right? And I never really recovered from it, and which is a good thing. When somebody impacts you that. I had a swim coach because I was on the swim teams, and I used to swim incessantly, and I had bad coaches and I had great coaches. but I had one that was just truly, truly inspirational. And that guy could make, he could touch a team, he could touch anybody, and he could get a ragtag team and just dominate. And he could get a person to do things that they've never thought that they could do before. John Hilbert was his name, and he still is one of the most influential people in my life. And he's the guy that would say to me when I was preparing for a race, whether it was like 50 free or 100 back at the state championships, and he would come behind me and say, in this race, you're going to take 2 seconds off your time because you're going to do that turn that I showed you how to do, and you're going to take 2 seconds off. And 2 seconds is like Foreverville in swimming, a short course swimming. It's unheard of. But he would say, like, I remember he would say that behind people, and he said it behind me on the block, and I like, and I'm not even kidding. I would like launch off the block, and I come back, and I set like these summer club state records. And I wasn't like a super special swimmer, but that coach believed in me, and he said things, and he said, you're gonna be a great person. You're gonna be a great athlete. And so he came out later on, many years later, to a rowing event. And Dan will laugh because they used to have this thing in non-Olympic years. It's called the Olympic Festival, and it was all the rowers go to this thing, and you do the Olympic Festival. And I remember racing in this thing. It's kind of the pre-elites, and we won. Like we won this thing. It was in '95, and that coach I invited, and he showed up to this thing, and it was in Boulder, Colorado, of all places. And he showed up, and he's just like, I told you so. I told you that you could do something, and this is just the beginning. And so I think that there's been like key individuals that go like throughout your life that just changes your course forever. And so I've had those, and those are heroes, and a lot of people talk about heroes and what they are, but they plant seeds in you, and so and they instill confidence. And they say things that like really recharacterize the way that you think. And so that's a little bit of my background, kind of my upbringing before I got to be an adult. So I hope I'm not eating up too much tape time, but like that I want to set the stage and just give you kind of a sight picture of where I came from.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Scott,
that's awesome. The drummer thing, I never knew. So Steve, go ahead.
yeah.
Please.
So, I mean, Scott, you're demurring, right? Like the whole, and I know that again, Dan mentions like the ethos, right? You're talking about your heroes. We eventually want to make this your hero's journey, right? And tell the story of you. And I think you have a really cool story because you have multiple hero's journeys, right? Like, it's not just the Prince Charming story where we finish the rowing story and you go off in the real world. And, like we get to eventually, when we get to the other end of this episode, we get to find out what happens after the happily ever after, right? In the part two, in the next phase, when you were looking for a little bit more adventure. But I do want to kind of fast forward to Northeastern, right? And it seems like you set up the groundwork very well for, I think young Scott was fertile ground. And, if it's impactful, tell us about how you chose Northeastern, but really like, I want to get to more than anything, like where those for whoever that was in Boston who like convinced you to like start rowing and got their hooks into you and that story.
I love it. No, Steve, that's really thoughtful, and I love telling this because it's more funny than it's inspiring. And I go back to when I was young, my mom used to make us listen to Lester Brown tapes, and you don't really understand why. And one of those was like, surround yourself with only quality people. And that was like OQP, only quality people. And I think that is like, if there's one thing that I remember, like, because I have a terrible memory. That's one thing I do remember. That is like that is so important. And I say that because that kind of tells the tale of how I ended up at Northeastern in a couple of different capacities. So Steve, I didn't start rowing in Northeastern. In fact, in Colorado, if you were to ask most people in Colorado what rowing is, or crew, they would they'd be like, is that I don't know, are you like change tires on race cars or something? Like my exposure to rowing, to crew, honestly, was to watch the 1984 Olympic 8-man boat, not rowing, but they were running down the beach with a boat over their head, and they had like goggles and speedos on, and there was nothing about rowing in that. I don't even know. It was like probably a speedo advertisement, but it was like that's a rowing boat. That's a crew. Okay, cool. And my brother was actually drafted, so he ended up going to Tulane University. And I'll kind of explain how I ended up there, but that's where I ended up. Um, uh, and so I'm jumping forward quite a bit, and we can go back and cover. There's a unique part of that story that maybe we can do it at another time. But Tulane University is where my brother went for ROTC, and so through a massive trial and error, I ended up getting awarded a naval ROTC scholarship, and 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 I ended up at Tulane. So I left Colorado State, went to Tulane, and of course I didn't have a penny. I didn't have any money at all. I spent all my money on a drum set, that I worked for years on a paper route, and I worked every job possible to just kind of have spending money that I played in video arcades. And so Tulane was a very unique time because my brother learned how to row at Tulane. And he wrote home in these letters that people actually used to write letters. And he would say, yeah, I've joined the crew team. And what in the world? And so I get to Tulane, and my brother was a really good rower. Like he was he was just super strong, and was on the varsity team. It was a club sport at Tulane. But he was also in engineering and ROTC, and so I think rowing kind of took a backseat for him. And so I show up, and I was a lifeguard just to help pay for school because I didn't, again, no money. I was on an ROTC scholarship and trying to do engineering, and the rowing coach for this club sport at Tulane comes up to me while I'm literally lifeguarding people at the pool, the college pool there in the Riley Center, and I'm twirling my whistle, and here comes this very he's a coxswain, so he's a small stature individual, but he is a mile high of personality. Spiky salt and pepper hair. His name's Bob Jockstetter. He comes up and he's like, hey, I want you to come down for a second. And I was like, sure, okay. Like, who are you? And he says, I'm the coach. I want you to come and row on one of these rowing machines. I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, I want you to come and just see if you can do it. Your brother he did great. You got the right build for it. Let's okay. So I went there. I literally found a substitute, and in my lifeguarding outfit, I went down with Bob Jockstetter down to the tanks in the same building, and I rowed on a rowing machine, and he said, "You're now no longer going to be a lifeguard. You're going to be on the rowing team." I think, wow, okay, this sounds great. What do I do? And so I rowed on this. I rowed at this club sport. I was a novice at Tulane University. Now, the rowing program there, I think there's a big dichotomy. There's a disparity between the seriousness of the typical rowers at Tulane and the coach and his expectation of what people should do. So this coach, it was phenomenal. He had quite a bit of history. He happened to be a silver medalist in that 1984 Olympic boat as a coxswain, and knew the sport inside and out, and it like lived, breathed the sport, and was one of the best coaches. It was very, he had a very unique coaching style, somewhat abrasive to some, but I loved it. I thought this guy was hilarious. And so I immediately I was drawn to the sport, but I was also frustrated because most other people there, with the selection of a few guys, weren't as serious about it, and to the point of the extent where we were the people that wanted to row every day. We would have to get up at 3:45 in the morning and go drag people out of their dorm rooms and get them into the van and drive to go to practice. I mean, we'd have to literally grab them out of the bed and go and get into the van because people wouldn't come on their own. We had to force them to row. And it was frustrating, but it was fun. It was a great outlet. And we had our novice boat was awesome. Like we were very we were rowing in this absolutely like a 45-year-old Dorigo, or it was a wooden boat, and it was amazing. It was
The Dorigo.
Oh, it was the Dorigo. I mean, it may have been like one of the first boats that this bowler made. I'm not sure, but it was wood and just iron, and but we rode it, and we could beat people. It was and it was fun, but then it got to be so much of a hassle to get people to row. Like you couldn't get the same 8 guys. But there were like 4 dudes that I was like, man, I could row with these dudes, and so I quit the team. I quit halfway through the year. I said, this is just like people are not getting it. It's frustrating. So I didn't show up, and the coach came to me because now I'm still lifeguarding. And he comes up to me. He's like, what do I need to do to get you to row? I need you on the team. I said, well, I'll row under one condition. I get to choose the boat, and I get to choose the rowers in the boat. He's like, no problem. And I said, I want a 4-man boat. And then I named the 4 people that I wanted in the boat. He's like, you got it. And we rowed that boat like it was, we rowed that boat like it was our job, and it was awesome, and it was fast, and we there was like the most ragtag boat. It was so unset. It was so just so horrible, but it was ballsy. It was great. It was like that boat should be on this show. That boat had the metal, and and everybody there was just scrappy, and just nobody had rowed before. Except one dude, Brian Sullivan. He stroked the boat, and he was our experience, and he just gung ho. Everybody, Brian Adams, myself, we ended up rowing with Christian Laskowski because Mike Kale left. But those 4 guys, we ended up going to the Dadville. We rowed in a boat that had one of the varsity van drivers broke the boat because he drove the van into a wall, and so it clipped off 6 feet of the bow of the boat. Yeah, so we ended up having to row this boat with this, and it had a hole, it was sheared off, this much was just duct taped over, and that's the boat that we rowed at the Augusta Invitational. We ended up rowing it at Dadville, and we qualified for the finals at Dadville with this heap of a boat that was broken literally in half, and it took on so much water that we couldn't even get it out of the water. We couldn't even get it over heads because it had 50 gallons of water coming out of the boat. And then they were like, okay, we're going to let you borrow another boat. And we ended up, I think, winning Dadville, which is a big deal when you're a club sport 4. And I was super happy. And that's when I went to the coach, and it was kind of like planetary alignment where I was, again, I'm going to spare you the details, but I was disqualified from the military, from the ROTC. I was physically disqualified. They found me unfit for military service. No kidding. And so you lose your financial scholarship. Now I have to pay for school, and I don't have a dime. And so I went to the coach. I was like, hey, coach, I'm in trouble. I can't afford this school. This school's ridiculously expensive. I don't have money. And he knew. He's like, there are 3 schools that you can go to that have scholarship programs, and we need to get you to one of those 3 schools. And one of them happened to be Northeastern. And I'll spare you details. I don't want to. I have to trash talk because I love UW. UW was awesome. That was like my primary, and I called the head coach, and he's like, "You how big are you?" I was like, "Well, 6'5", 205 pounds." He's like, "That's it." Oh, well, you're gonna have to talk to the freshman coach or the JV coach. We're dealing with real people here. It's like, wow. I I am like setting records at this club sport. I'm pretty much a big deal. And
That must have been Bob Ernst, right, at that time.
it was Bob Ernst. Yeah, he had nothing to do with me. He's like, man, it was pretty funny to collect those shirts later that season. Because I did, we ended up seeing him again. But so Northeastern, Buzz Conlon, he answered. He's like, hey, let's take some video of you maybe on a rowing machine or something, and so I did. I tried. My friends at the Fort Collins Club, they videotaped me on a rowing machine. We sent in a VHS videotape. And Buzz,
it wasn't this. It wasn't a camera. It wasn't a camera. It was this. It was this. The big ass thing on his shoulder.
It was a huge thing. I mean, it was like the just absolute ridiculousness of this was. I don't even know where we got the camera, but it was massive. Sent in the VHS tape, and Buzz answered, and he said, "Hey, let's get you up to Northeastern on a conditional." He said on a incentive conditional scholarship. And I was like, "Well, what does that mean?" He's like, "Well, if you can make the varsity boat, then we'll pay for half your tuition." I was like, "Amazing. Let's So I showed up. Later that summer. I'd never been to Boston, and I was like, "Well, Buzz, I don't have any money. I can't afford tuition. I can't afford a place to live." And he's like, "Oh, I'm going to talk to my friend Rose Colucci. She runs Residence Life, and we're going to see if she'll make you into a resident assistant. And he did. He manufactured greatness. He enabled me to get to Northeastern. I was a RA, so they covered room and board. And I got, I was accepted into engineering program, and I remember the first day that I showed up at Northeastern's boathouse, because I was kind of a big deal from Tulane. I knew what I was doing. I was a big dude, and I showed up to Henderson, the Northeastern boathouse, and I think my neck, I like almost broke my neck, because I was just like, these people are huge, man. What did I get myself into? I'm never gonna make the varsity boat here. They're laughing at me, like, who's this scrawny little dude, and I remember like that first practice, and then Buzz, it's at night because we used to row at night, and everybody's like 9 feet tall, and here's me, and Buzz he calls the lineups, and he's like, okay, first boat, Tim Bogo, Aaron Frank, and I remember Chad Harding and Scott Fentress, and I was like, he must have said third boat. I got to find some, like, I need to find out what's going on, like what, and they were like, no, man, grab your oar, let's get on the boat, and I'm like, no, like I don't even know what I'm doing here, like, and I didn't. I remember the guys that were in that boat, they're like, what is this dude doing? He can't even get his blade in the water. Like I just remember Buzz, like every time that Buzz, on his microphone, he had the megaphone from the yellow launch, and for like 6 weeks straight, he didn't say a thing to anyone else other than me. He was like, Ventress, get your blade in the water, back it, like, you're fucked up. You're so late. You're late. And, Bo Dawson was the coxswain, and he was brutal. He's just like, you don't know what you're doing. Get your blade in. You're late. Yeah. It's just like unbelievable. Like, probably a million strokes I took thinking it was going to be my last. And I pulled as hard as I could, and eventually tried to get that blade in the water. And that was my job. I was like, get the blade in the water. Like, everybody else seems to have like this perfect just form, just this beautiful Buzz Congram rowing style. Like, Northeastern is known for its just beautiful rowing, and I was a hack. Johnny Brokars and I were hacks. And so then, they break the 8s into the 2-man boats, and you row Cox pairs for like a month, and all you do is row Cox pairs. And the guy that I rode with the Cox Sparrow with was this huge dude. For like 2 years straight, all I did was row right behind this guy, Johnny Brokars, and his back is like he's 6'8". He's enormous dude, and he is as strong as a buffalo. In fact his call sign is the White Buffalo. Like he's just this huge dude. All I saw is like this back, and so he and I rode this Cox Sparrow, and we didn't row it pretty. It was horrific rowing. It was probably some of the worst rowing that school had ever seen because Johnny was also kind of he was a transfer or he's a walk on, and Johnny Brokars was just a wildly strong, and of course I was so club sport and I couldn't get my blade in the water, so we were just a hack in this Cox Sparrow, but we rode our hearts out, man. We just rode every stroke like it was the last stroke that we were going to take, because we were both unknowns. We didn't row in elementary school or junior high school or the Hun school. We didn't, and he and I were just these blue collar dudes, and we just could get and we ended up like moving the boat pretty well. And they do these things called the turtle races, and the coxswains all get together and and it's funny, this is how you learn to row. You row in a two-man boat, and I tell you that was one of the most magnificent things that you used to do, aside from like the weight program that Tim Boga had us. But and Buzz is just magical. The Cox pairs, you go to these turtle races and you race on Lake Quinsigamond, and the coxswains all do this they draft up these predictions, the Vegas odds on these guys, and so the odds for prediction, Grant and Tim Boga are going to win, and Johnny Brokars and I weren't even in like the run. We were like, I think our odds of winning were like 100 to 1 or something. And I used to keep these notes. They're really funny. They're funny write-ups, and we were like the dark horse is what we were. Our moniker was. And we earned it because nobody knew us. We were just an unknown. Nobody knew us ever. And I remember we showed up to the race day, and I'm not sure if it was like we were the only sober ones, but we won with open water. I mean, it was like 3 boats of open water, and it was like, hold on, time out. Did anybody else take this as seriously as us? We just rode and we won the race. We won race after race after race. And I was like, this can't be right. These are Northeastern varsity rowers. How are we keeping up? How are we keeping up with them? We're terrible rowers. And so Buzz stuck us in the engine room, and there we did. We just provided engine power for the boat, and that boat was just I still to this day I don't think that I should have been in that boat. That boat was so strong and so powerful and so fast in '96. That was kind of an eye opener for me, and I was like, oh my gosh, even just the starting 10 strokes were so wild and out of control because there's so much power in that boat. I don't think that I did not shoulders of giants. You talk about Mettle, there's this thing called shoulders of giants, and I was very lucky. There's an opportunity. They taught me how to row, and this crew, Buzz and everybody in that boat, they were accepting of this idiot clown from Tulane, from Colorado, never heard of rowing, but they built this command climate, this boat culture that made that boat unbeatable. And it was so that year, I just remember it programmed me for a love of the sport that I never even thought could exist. I didn't care what I was doing that day. I didn't care what exams or what homework or what I was doing at school. I didn't care how much sleep I looked forward, and I loved going to the boathouse and rowing with these guys. And for 2.5 hours, nobody would say anything, and you would just hear that, and it was just magical. We just rode in the middle, in the darkness, and that magic, and just knowing that, I was just never wanting to let those guys carry my weight, and yeah, I have to give credit to the people that were leaders in this in the crew, and those are heroes too, Buzz, he created he created a culture. He cultivated an environment that people thrived and people wanted to be there and had fun. And so rowing that first year was very telling. It was it was a turning point for me, pivotal point in my life. And Steve Simcoe, the team captain, he created like a harmony there that just was amazing. Like everybody loved each other in that boat, and it was just I mean, with the occasional just people giving each other a hard time for whatever. Um, and but that love and that respect for others was something that programmed me for the rest of my for the rest of my life, even and will for the rest of my life. So to Steve, kind of to your point, your testament, like what goes forward. These are pivotal points, and these are pivotal people that provided an environment that I thought that refined the metal of what we're talking about. You guys are a metal factory. That was a factory of metal, and it was a wild experience. But it's life changing moment. And so,
Wait, I got to pause you, Scott, because you're like you're almost there, right? You're almost to this I think what we all know here on this side, this really historic season for two reasons. But the timeline of it's really just interesting to me because there's two things. One is anybody else glitching out, or is it just me?
it might be you because I see everybody else, but
Yeah.
you're frozen in time.
Let me give it. I'm gonna just click a button here, and then we're gonna move forward. Right. I'm
Okay.
gonna click a button here, and we're gonna see your video will come back. We'll see if it might be a little awkward. Like you're gonna be on camera always. But I'm gonna just click in low data mode so that we can actually like hear in real time.
Okay.
And
'Cause I think it's me because my video I'm delayed. Every time I move, I see myself move 10 seconds later.
yeah, it might be. I'm just
All
gonna click. I'm just gonna click low data mode. So it's gonna keep recording in high quality. Obviously, I'll pull this part out. But then the conversation can hopefully keep up, and we're not getting distracted at all. So if
Okay.
you guys don't mind, I'll just keep the low data mode on. I thought it was supposed to do lower quality video, but I guess it's turning off your video. But it's still recording video. It's not video still on.
Okay.
You're on camera, so
Yep.
don't start like picking your nose or anything. Like you're just
All right.
talking. All right. Let's try
Everybody
that.
else
Let's
okay?
let's experiment with it for a little bit, and I can turn it off as we get to
Okay.
another break if it's ruining things. Okay.
Okay. Is everybody still there?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Scott's here.
All right. So Scotty, you just got to Northeastern the fall of '95 from Tulane. Like I just want to set that timeline correctly. Is that accurate?
That's right. That is correct.
All right. So you're a walk-on at Tulane. You had won Dadvilles, which in a very Northeastern way, because Northeastern's first 65 crew swept Dadvilles. So you win Dadvilles. You get a sense of what it means to win
In a boat with a hole in it, apparently.
a boat with a hole in it. But you get a sense of what it means to win a 6-boat rowing race, which is really important, right? There really is so many different ways to try and tell someone that doesn't understand what it means to be in a 6-boat rowing race and just how intense it is. But it takes you to Boston for the first time. So you're in this new city, in this new environment with all these other athletes. You and Johnny Bebop just start putting yourselves together and getting your foxhole of a pair and decide that you're just going to keep getting better. You wind up being the top pair at the end of the fall. You did gloss over a little bit of winter training in Boston, which is never easy. But I got to imagine that that's where your fitness really started to help you shine in that environment. But I'd love to know just a little bit of like, how did that boat start to come together through the winter and galvanize into what became, spoiler alert for now, an undefeated Eastern Sprints crew. And for anyone who's a rowing fan of the show, just how amazing that is to have an undefeated season through sprints. So please take us a little bit into like, January through March of that environment.
Awesome. Well, that's a great question. And Dan, coming from you, that's I appreciate that. So coming off the heels of the Head of the Charles, the Head of the Charles is another example. This is a head race. It's a 3-mile race in the fall. And we did very well. We medaled in there. I think the U.S. national team was faster. We ended up getting a 4th place medal or 3rd place medal at that race, a bronze medal. And so we were defeated by the U.S. national team, probably the Canadian boat, and so it set the stage for the rest of the fall season. You do the foot of the Charles, you break into fours, and you really start gearing for what's called the sprints season after the head season. So I remember I was in Boston because I didn't have money to travel. I couldn't go back home. So I became really intimately familiar with the tanks and training in this environment. They call it the tanks, and it's this dark dungeon that is a very low ceiling literally underneath the pool in the Cabot gym at Northeastern, right off of Huntington Avenue, and it's just pipes and air conditioning, and it's just noisy, and it's an ugly place to train, and it's brutal. It's like old school brutal simplicity. You had the rowing machines, and you had this crappy concrete tanks, and it was just loud music. They had small weight. We had the weights, and so I learned that became my hated love. Like, you just hated that place, but loved it for what it was worth. It was just like a very primitive gym environment. There was no distractions. There was nothing that precluded you from getting the work done. And it's like buzz was always in there, because in winter training it's a little weird, because you're in a school that it's a quarter system, so it's in school all the time, and everybody has weird hours of operation. Some people are at work because they're doing a cooperative education, and so they can't train at the same time. And so it was really up to you whenever you could get your workout in, whether that was morning, afternoon, evening, but you just have to go and do it. So it wasn't like everybody was there at the same time. You'd have a contingent of guys that would be at the same time, and I felt like the workouts were just long. We were doing a very exceptional weight training program that Tim Boga had introduced us to the team. I think it was like the West German national team weight circuit that was at the time it was a little extreme. Nobody had ever heard of it. I never heard of this type of a weight program, and we were doing like
but that's great. We got to think about that too. Like, that's a wild place to just pause right there, and it just kind of ties into the theme, because this is 1995, 1996. Like, when did the Berlin Wall fall? 1989.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, it was still very.
So
yeah.
like a unified Germany was still an infancy of a country, and Voga would have come up, because Voga was a junior rower, correct?
That's right.
Yeah. So I think of like, Tim as a young man growing up in in a Western German system, with the amount of juicing that those athletes were doing, I couldn't imagine what the training program looked like.
Unbelievable. And so he took us on this ride that it's
I'm not
still,
saying Tim. I'm not
it's
saying Tim juiced. Just Tim, if you're listening, I'm not saying you juiced. I'm just saying that Western Germans is they were juicing, and so therefore the training program was a based off of that physiology augment.
Tim is a freak. He was a freak of nature. The fact that like he survived an environment where they were just but retained his level of talent and capability. And so we're doing this weight circuit that it was mind numbing, and it took 2.5 hours to get through just the weight routine itself, and it involved things like six sets of 60 repetitions of whether that was leg press, bench pulls, like, and so, and when you're in your 20s, like your body can handle this, you develop this resilience, this tolerance, you develop resolve. Like, I remember the first couple of weeks or couple months that we were doing this silly weight program, and I'm never hurt like that. You do 60 reps, 6 sets of 60 reps of bench pulls. And I think the first time you're doing them with like a 70-pound, bar. But by the end of it, I mean, guys are doing, I remember Steve Simcoe, like Todd Drescher, some of these guys were doing like 60 repetitions of 135 pounds. And, and just like, and just developing a strength that is very unique. And so people were very strong. Like there was a strong crew. But then we did the typical buzz training, and it was every other day you would do 3 by 20 minutes, and then on the other off days, so 3 times a week you do 3 by 20s, and then off days you do 4 by 10, and then you could do and sometimes alternate on the rowing machine, sometimes in the tanks, where you're rowing, an oar. Yeah, everybody's like in a concrete boat that doesn't go anywhere, and your oars and oarlocks push water in pools that go around in circles, so it kind of simulates rowing, and everybody, you just go to sleep rowing hard, and yeah,
no fancy moving water tanks, baby. Just
there's nothing fancy about that, man. It's just nothing. It was crazy, silly, ridiculous. It's just
boring for the coxswain. Trust me, it's equally as boring to watch.
I can't even imagine. Like the coxswains were getting stronger than we were, because they were down there all the time. They were all the time, and the coxswains were down there all the time. I mean,
I'm stopping you because you're glossing over. I need to know. Right, because I'm very much doing my thing, and I'm making about me. I'm sorry. What I need to know is, dude, when did you start beating everybody on the erg?
Nobody beats anybody on the erg. This is Northeastern we're talking about. You're doing so much volume. We did so much volume that it just like, and I'm assuming you're talking the collective you. No one was setting records on their rowing machine. By comparison to like international crews or the national team or other like Princeton, Harvard, Penn, they had guys that were all below 6 minutes, and we had like one dude below 6 minutes, but we didn't train for rowing erg tests. I think if we trained for rowing or erg tests, we could have done it. We would have done fine. But Buzz had a different calculus of training in mind, and that's what we executed. We just did massive volume, and then accentuated that with massive strength training. And so I think the combination of that started this special sauce that boat had. Now that's just the physical preparation, and I really think you had a core nucleus of guys that had raw talent. But more, I think on the greater end of that scale, you had guys that just didn't have a lot of raw talent. They just were crazy. Like and so we kind of pushed each other, and everybody had a really fun, like we ended up, I think the eight Buzz started to get everybody, the 8, the varsity 8 on the same time frame, and so that we were in there in the same time. in the tanks, and then of course it translated to the water. As soon as you basically just get on the water, as soon as the ice, you have you don't have an ice that precludes you from being able to row on the water. So you get on the water as soon as you can in January. But the 8 started to come together with again that culture, and a lot of it was just the people in there. But like we would throw a ball, before we would work out, before we would get on the water, before we would train on the weights, we would do these like silly jumping jacks. They call them congrams. You do about like 1,000 of them, and you start cracking jokes. People start laughing at it, and then you literally just started. That I think people were having fun, knowing you're about to just punish yourself, and that's really like where that fraternal, that camaraderie, that team, that unification, started to gel that team, so that we became like this indestructible ball of iron. And I go back to the ball because a lot of teams, many years later would try to copy, or they tried to mimic or reproduce something that we would go into the boathouse. The first thing we'd do is throw the silly ball, something that Bo Doss and the coxswain had, and we would throw a ball to each other. And it was silly. Like what? But that was like our routine. That was our thing. That was the kind of the little special thing that got us in a mindset, and it enabled you to it was like coking and joking, we call it, around a campfire or whatever. You develop a love, just like when you interact with your peers, and you develop a trust. Yeah, and trust creates that mission command, that ability for that, you just like inseparable love for one another, and so that was what kind of the routine before we would get into the transition to the boathouse, and our warm up was the ball, and so some of that special sauce was like that unification of the guys coming together before we would actually get on the water, and I'm trying to answer that question, and I apologize for rambling, but is that what you're getting after, Dan?
Can I be the guy that interrupts and says, like, when did you go to school? Like, when did you do the school thing? When, like, there's 24 hours in a day. Like, I know, like, Dan's always said, like, Dan and Justin have always said Northeastern, like, you guys row at like 8 o'clock at night and just put lights on the boat. But like, y'all weren't hermits, right? Like, when did you, that was a lot of volume. I'm just trying to do the math in my head. I'm trying to do the math in my head, and I'm like, where are the hours?
And it's funny. That's all you like. People would go to school, with a couple of exceptions. I'll get into that later.
Steve,
yeah.
Steve, you're getting ahead of the.
I forgot about that part, but I guess it's a good segue.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
so
hold on.
No,
we're not talking about school. Sorry, I'm vetoing Steve's.
I just want to know how you had hours for that, because I'm amazed, right? Like, because we
You
have
gotta
all these
want it,
stories.
Steve. You gotta want it.
I'm telling you.
Stories about like the East Germans coming over after the wall, and they're bringing these crazy workouts with them, and I'm just like, man, like, how many hours are there in the day? Did we switch to like a 26-hour day?
Not everyone's so lucky to go to Princeton where they have special training time.
And it's like,
man,
like 95, 96, like the stuff's not tracked. Like it's just so different.
God, like, it's funny. Like
you get off the water when you get off the water.
Yeah,
that's how it goes. There's no like, oh, well, this is it.
Yeah, sometimes we would be home at like 10 o'clock at night.
There's no Kara in the 90s. No Kara in the 90s. Got it.
No, not that I know.
No, like that's how you rolled. I mean, it was crazy. Like, because we had to row at night because several of the guys
away from campus,
not only 6 miles away, but they were in full-time jobs. Like you're in a cooperative education environment, so these guys were going into work early in the morning and they're doing a full work day, in, you know, whatever it was that they're in business schools, or if they're in a business, or if they were work, because you're working in MIT's laboratories or Kendall, you know, you're doing like jobs that engineers or, you know, accountants, like you're pulling full hours if you're not in this school program. And again, the schools are tough. I mean, my work, all my professors were like, they had rewritten gas law. They were, I mean, this was not like a joke of a school. You know, they're all MIT guys coming over, and so you just, the balance, there was like no balance. So great question.
Is the short answer you just stopped sleeping?
Yeah, I didn't sleep. So I don't know how other guys did it, but you can do things for a long time. Like, yeah, you know, there's a great.
All right.
I'm going to paraphrase because I want to make sure that we are respectful of the story. I want to make sure that we're respectful of time. I'm saying it right now, Scott, don't rush, because we're going to do an episode 2, right?
Yeah.
We just have to. There's no way we're going to get through in the next 40 minutes everything that's so important about this. And I really want to come back to, because it's the thing that really intrigues me, and it's probably because there's a personal bias with Justin and I here, and Luke's as quiet as usual. Now I can't see him, so for all I know, he's writing training plans. I'm super intrigued on how you guys galvanized and how you started to create this unit. One that, like, you and John were outsiders. So first of all, like, the 6 other guys that were in that boat that had the openness to like see talent in you is just a whole nother, as a coach and an athlete, just really intrigues me. The fact that you're a transfer, and then like you're going through this winter training that doesn't have empirical data of erg tests and stuff like that to create a pecking order. So it really was just creating this vibe that 8 of you gravitated towards. Buzz had the foresight to try getting you to practice together and increase that vibe. And now we're getting on the water. Was there a lot of selection between you and a JV, or was it clearly like these are the 8 guys in Coxon that are going to be this boat?
Okay, let me unpack your question a little bit, because there's a lot in there. So kind of dovetailing in, you know, the magic that kind of gelled that crew, what brought that crew together. And I'm going to go to that part of the question first. I'm a, you know, I hate to sound cliche like, but leadership is the cause and cure of all problems, but it's also, leadership is the cause for success. Like, you can't have success without leadership. And you know, I know I glossed over the empirical data that you mentioned. Buzz was very hyper meticulous about data keeping, and he logged every single meter on every second of everything that you ever did. And he compiled a lot of information and just poured over it like incessantly. The guy would watch videos again and again and again and again and again. Like, I mean, the guy studied. He knew exactly what he was doing. I mean, he was very technique oriented, but he created an environment that, and again, like the team captain and the other guys, the seniors, the juniors, like the experienced guys, like they created this harmony, this gel, and that's kind of that set the stage for the crew, the boat, and that creates a bit of a magic. You know, any successful crew is going to have some magic. You know, you read Boys in the Boat. You know, you've been in some magical crews, and I really feel like you create that trust that I mentioned earlier, that trust in every single person that's in that boat, and you know, you hold yourself accountable to those guys, and because you don't want them to carry your weight, and so everybody kind of built this apparatus of singularity of that boat, and it became a special thing that was impenetrable. Now, to the second part of the question, how did it interface with the other team? And we didn't really you know,
Yeah.
I feel like the crew was locked in pretty early on, and we didn't swap guys out um, at all. Once that kind of magic 8, it was it. That was it. There was no question
Yeah.
who was going to be in that boat. It didn't change. With some rare occasion, like you change it up occasionally in like spring training and stuff. You swap guys. So we would seat race just like anyone else. And so that you could get some calculable data on individuals and stuff. But that was the magic was everybody wanting to get to the boathouse, everybody loving the ball, like and honestly that just 2.5 hours of silence, that time in the boat was like
Got it.
a sanctuary. It was sacred, and uh, you just had to enjoy the moment of when you launched, pushed off the dock, and just not hear anything other than the blades going into the water and blades coming out of the water. Buzz, all you would hear is the motor on the launch,
Have the highest
and you're just
quality
wondering, is like Buzz, is Buzz
internet, so I
even
want to make
watching
sure
us?
it's not
Is he
ending up
looking at
because
us?
my
Like,
shit sucks.
and he kind of let the boat do a lot of its own coaching. We were very blessed with Bo Dawson. That guy could see. I mean, he could see everything that you're doing, and he did a lot of the coaching. Buzz, all he ever did was yell at me and Johnny B, depending on which side of the launch was on. And so they gave us the attention. And I got everybody would do coaching. I remember Aaron Frank from the 7 seed. He constantly he said something to me after every practice. So I feel like there was a lot of people bringing us in, the experienced guys, even Tim Volga, is just huge German guy that's like 7 feet tall, and he would say something that would resonate in the boat, and everybody would just be like, "That is gospel." Like,
Way
what just
communication.
happened?
It's
What did
the
he just say? What
upload
happened? Okay, that's
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 slow.
the way we're going. Um,
Dan, did you message him and
and people would crack jokes. He
did you
would.
message
I
him
just like
or
people didn't take anything too seriously.
okay.
You had this weird camaraderie. People could make fun of each other, and like Buzz Congram would stop the boat all of a sudden, just be like, "Okay, we're gonna take pulses in 2, ready, go." And you do take everybody, because nobody knew what heart rate monitors back in then in that 70s when we were rowing, and that was like 100 years ago, but Buzz knew about heart rate training, and so guys that were like physically gifted, like Grant,
Yeah.
his heart rate would be
Yeah.
about 40 beats below anybody else, and
Yeah.
Tim Boga would like lay into him and be like,
Yeah.
Grant, man, I get my heart rate higher going taking the crap on the John, these people just Grant Earl's heart is the size of a basketball. So everybody knew that Grant was twice as powerful as anybody else in the boat, but his body didn't produce a heart rate that was commensurate with the level of output that he had. But everybody just took it in stride, and that defined some of that the culture of that boat. It was a personality that was just everybody kind of. I mean, we knew going into another boathouse, we knew we were going to win. Like the race, I felt like was over before we even got on the water. Like we had such a great time. It didn't even matter. Like we go out there and row, and we knew we could row through people in the first 500 because nobody could keep up with us in the first 10, 20 strokes. And I remember we would just demoralize crews, and I don't think anybody ever could row back into us, because I think that was one of the techniques that we had. We were really, really fast out of the gates.
Oh.
We had horsepower, and we had stamina, and we kind of rode on that. And Buzz knew how to train. That guy was doing yoga like when nobody knew how to do yoga. We were doing this relaxation drills. When that wasn't like I'd never heard of that. I never seen that. And we were doing meditation. We were doing like this weird stuff. But ultimately, I think it brought the crew together, even if it made us think that Buzz was an oddball, which is somewhat true. But Buzz was magical. He created that environment. It was awesome. So hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, Rom, like how the boat started to form, and maybe let's just go through the spring of '96, and see what that summer meant after that.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good place to pick up for part two, or go into and you took that to winning the worlds and further on. So if everyone's cool with that, we'll pick up there and just kind of talk about the '96 season, and then we'll figure out a time to do part two.
Outstanding. Yeah, no, that's great, man. Thank you. So without further ado, and I apologize because there's probably 5 minutes of me telling this story before, I don't know how this will come out, but because I was just talking to Blank.
Might be all recorded.
It might be. I don't know. We'll see. But I don't mind kind of recapping this in probably in a much more accelerated fashion. So the boat gelled. I don't know. It really started to come together when we got on the water again, and then I mean, the boat was already set. So we knew who was going to be in that boat. The 8 guys were pretty much declared. And we didn't, aside from seat racing when we would do spring training, not many, it wasn't like you were going to come out permanently. So I was always afraid that I wasn't a welcomed guest, an entity. So I always felt like my position in the boat was in jeopardy. So I was always just rowing as hard as I could. But we would have this pre-race ritual, pre-workout ritual, whether we were in the tanks, whether we were in the boathouse, whether we were in another boathouse, in a dual meet scenario. But we had a ball, and we'd throw the ball to each other. We'd get in a giant circle with all 9 guys, and we would throw this ball to each other, back and forth, and then crack jokes. And it kind of just, it loosened people up, but it provided this campfire setting, where nothing mattered except for what was going on with this ball. Like all the world just kind of faded away. All your homework assignments, all your work commitments, all your girlfriend troubles or boyfriend troubles, really just went away. And it just brought people it just brought this focus, this singularity. And everybody, it didn't matter what else was going on. It didn't matter what boathouse. It didn't matter where we were. It didn't matter if it was raining. It didn't matter if it was snow. It didn't matter. Nothing mattered. And so this became our routine, and it was just what we did every time that we got together. We threw this ball, and we were relentless and just crack jokes about each other, and just there's so much material. You never run out of material when you have people like Johnny B, or Aaron Frank, Tim Boga. You could just back on him all the time. It's these people are indestructible. The team, the individuals in there were indestructible. Steve Simcoe, again, I go back to leadership. Steve Simcoe, the team captain, created this environment where nothing could rattle us. And so when we would travel, and I apologize because I said it in my diatribe that's probably in cyberspace somewhere, but we would get out on the water, and push off, and the magic, the magic would just all of a sudden would intensify, and it was you couldn't see, it was dark on the water, and all you could hear was the blades. And for 2.5 hours, it's all aside from listening to Buzz's coach's launch, droning on for hours, with the occasional Fentress back it in, you're missing all sorts of water. You're knucklehead. Bo Dawson,
Scott, you're a little late. Scott, you're a little late. Let's get that blade in, Scott.
I mean, and I really this is not self-deprecating. You ask anybody in that boat, and they're like, yeah, Fentress, that guy couldn't row for beans.
No,
They
you were
were
just the
all.
coaching. You were just the coaching shield.
I was it. I was the target, man.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was the body armor. I was the body armor because everything was
Steve, no,
directed to me.
Steve knows that intimately. Steve was the recipient
No.
of when the coaching
I
shield
was.
fails.
Yeah, I was always the secondary target.
Yeah. A quick side note. We were at Worlds. Pat O'Dunn was the coaching shield of the time. This is 2007. So like qualifying year, a lot of pressure. And Tady's just relentless on Pat. Like Pat, like over and over again. Just
Same
up
thing.
and down.
Same thing. Get your blade in.
Yeah,
Get your blade in.
You're not in time. You're messing up for everybody. And all of a sudden, it went from Pat to this next. That was like Steve, fuckhead.
One.
that was the coaching.
Bad,
Just Steve, fuckhead.
one bad stroke. The guy was just really tired of talking to Pat, and I was next up.
Coaching
you're in line.
seal fail. Yeah.
Oh man.
You know,
So you're the coaching.
You were the,
So you're the coaching seal for the crew. You're having these epic night rows, which Justin, I mean, I don't know how much this rushing back to you, but it's almost like it is like a sensory deprivation take because it's so dark, it's so cold, and all you really have is just what you can feel, and you're having this kind of magical moment. I gotta imagine you're in the Resolute 2, and those boats were just the audible sound of like how loud they were, and the feeling of the vibration of that fin, and you just know when the boat's hauling ass. And like take us into because it was the season opener still the BU duel.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So like, just take us into getting ready for that first race where you're like, you've done all this volume, you've done all this training. It's been the Buzz Congram, not really empirical data show, and you're about to get your first real sense of empirical data.
So yeah, man, I'm gonna back up because you bring up a really good point. That sound on the water. We were rowing in Black Z1, Black Z1, Resolute's first boat they ever made. And it was something, and it was funny. It came to us because they had initially made it, and they had given it, or they had sold it to the national team, and the national team just was like, this thing sucks. Like it couldn't be set up. It was they couldn't set it up. They didn't like how it rode. It was too short. It was wobbly. It was vibrating. It was too stiff. It was like this. It was the stiffest boat I've ever rode. And it I felt like the gunnels were really, really high. And it was super tippy. It felt like you were the high center of gravity. It was a weird boat. But Buzz was like, get in that boat. We're like, no. We want to row the Nancy Ann. We want to row that Empacher that is it's like a Cadillac. I want to row that Empacher right there. That's the one we want. No,
get in the read my freshman year was the Nancy Ann.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It is a Cadillac.
It's such a Cadillac. It was so nice.
Yeah. It was cushy. Yeah.
So cushy. It was so forgiving. It was just like it was like made to row. And the Germans got it right.
And sinks.
Yeah, apparently.
And sinks.
And sinks. Yeah.
So you're rowing the Resolute.
Resolute. So and
just for context for the audience, in 1996, it's a very futuristic boat. It's all carbon fiber. It's black, and it's kind of like a missile. As a coxswain, it's definitely like a missile. It's a very abstract theory at the time to get in that boat. So just to set context.
This boat did not have a fin. It didn't have a stabilizer fin. It only had a rudder, and the rudder was like this big. It was a huge rudder. Whereas every other boat has a big fin and a tiny little rudder. And so we were driving. We're running this boat that like even the smallest input from the coxswain, it would just dump the boat. You would just but like I think the combination of the coxswain learning how to drive this thing and just you had a bow pair, so you're the guys that are in the bow, which are all the way back. You sit backwards in these silly boats. You need some technicians in that bow pair that can provide a lot of power. And I tell you what, we had Chad Harden and Steve Simcoe that I blame them for setting the boat, but anything that was unset was because of me. So I gladly take that because I didn't know, I could, my dump finish, I couldn't get the catch, and I was a hack. But that boat, once we learned, it took a long time, it took a couple months to be able to set that boat up. But Buzz, he believed in it. He's just like, no, figure it out, set the boat up, get it, set the boat, and we did, and uh, uh, and we learned how to set that boat to the point where like we could row an hour straight and not even tap the blades. It was just it's crazy, on a curvy course like the Charles, where you have a lot of hard turns and the boat responded. So that again, part of the magic. Now that boat, it responded well to the violent speed that we delivered to that. There was just a lot of power. That boat responded to power, and you'll see like that the rigidity of the boat, the design, just how it would hum when you get it up to speed. It produced a noise. It was really weird. Um, and the designers, I remember to this day I was an engineer, and I was so delighted when I saw Buzz Conger like sanding the shell, the outer hull of the boat, and I was like, awesome! I know exactly what he's doing, because he's creating this a layer of basically a water friction barrier, and which reduces the drag on the boat in theory. But people were like, what are you doing, man? You want a glossy boat? And so Buzz was just very forward thinking, and applied basic principles about how the endless number of hours that Buzz would like be tweaking the angles and the oar locks and the position on the oar locks, on the riggers, just constant adjusting of riggers, and because he had a vision, and so I think a combination of all those things created this really weird dynamic, a very unique dynamic. So to the point, we would go to another boathouse, we'd be throwing the ball, and we knew we were going to win. Nobody could keep up with us, and we would win the race before we'd even leave the dock. And we knew within 10, nobody could keep up with us in the first 10 or 20 strokes, because the amount of power we deliver. And just, a lot of times we've won the race just discouraging the crew, either with the ball in their own boathouse, or we got open water in 15 strokes. And I think crews just couldn't believe how fast we were out of the gate. And when we were just depending on stamina to get us to the finish line. And so testament to a lot of different variables. And I covered a couple of things, Dan, that I think that bring to light and reinforce some basic principles of what makes a crew magical. And that trust that everybody had, that love, the fun that people had, and the advantages that we had because of the physical training that we had, the conditioning program that Tim Boga and Buzz and the senior guys that were in that boat created a wild combination of very successful tools. Again, putting tools in your toolkit that resulted in a fun and fast boat, and it was an undefeated boat. So going into the first race, I was still really inexperienced, and so I didn't have a lot of context, and I didn't have a lot of other. I didn't have any like racing history with these other crews, one of the first ones was BU, Boston University, but we had seen them in the head of the Charles, the foot of the Charles, and I feel like we rolled in there with some confidence that was just like, okay, that's like even though that's a very fast crew, fast program, I know the special sauce that we have is, and I'm just gonna I'm gonna row in my little compartment, and I'm just gonna control things that I can control. And boom, out of the gate, 10 strokes into the race, and and we would be like, our stern would be on their bow ball, and Bo Dawson, the coxswain, would just get everybody supercharged and just be like, okay, let's just keep walking, and we would just keep walking, and like every single race, we could watch the other crew just sort of like fall apart, because they would, you'd see their oars like just coming apart, and uh, almost every single time, that's exactly what happened. Is you get open water in the first 500, the first quarter of the race, and it's hard to row from behind. It's hard. I've done it a lot. In fact, I've done that, but it is really, really hard. Um, and I think that our blue collar mentality, man, we were just like, you know, I mean, everybody had different hair color. We were just these wild animals on the river, and we would hoot and holler, but we would sometimes demoralize other crews, going into the 1,000, and then the race is over. Um, that's not the case with Harvard. Like that's not a crew that you can easily demoralize. Princeton, it's not a crew that you can do. These are programs that just like they eat they eat us for lunch, every other year. And like, and so I think they're surprised when we would use that element of surprise that year. When we were super fast or strong, but uh, I think a lot of these crews were just like, wow, what just happened? How did they do that? Where did Northeastern come from? And so there was some of that, but also we were delivering some times that were that were remarkable. We were, rowing 520s consistently, and that's pretty fast. Even today, with today's standards,
It's straight up fast. Sub 530 is straight up fast, right? Like you need to, in order to go sub 520, you need perfect conditions. So, and you're talking about spring racing. Yeah, you're talking about spring racing on the Charles. Water's cold. There is wind. It's fast.
It was cool. And so every race kind of has its own unique. We going into Penn. I just remember Penn was just brutally windy, and and I think one of the advantages that we had with Penn was like this boat that we were rowing with these super high gunnels. I think if we had a lower, smoother, a little bit lower boat, we would have sunk it. It would have been the sinking Nancy Ann. And the Resolute just had like, not only did it have these super high gunnels, but they still like the deck top was like fanned out, and it was flared out.
Like a 2-inch lip that was like flared out.
Huge lips that on either side. And so waves would just like come up and just they would like splash away from the boat. And if we were in the Nancy Ann, those waves would just like create tidal waves coming in the boat. So I think there was some technological advantage that we just didn't, you can't plan for that. I don't know if that was by design or if that was just to get that boat, torsionally rigid. I have no idea. But that's, man, I tell you, it broke my heart watching them cut that boat in half. I was like, they just killed the boat. That was kind of the spring season, man.
So who was your biggest challenge during that season? Because now we do have Luke here, and Luke hates to live in the past, but he is the resident legacy expert, right? Luke not only had an undefeated season, but he had 4, and it's something that I did not get to experience in rowing. I get to experience in wrestling, and it's Steve, you got to experience one, right, at Princeton, like
Yep.
that momentum, right, and that reinforcement of that momentum is such a captivating feeling. And with knowing that we're really short on time, can you just give us kind of 3 signals to you that, like, one is, who was your biggest competition in that regular season? Like, which of those crews try to give you the biggest challenge?
Harvard, hands down. Harvard was like, I think there was a mental obstacle, with Harvard, and they were one of the toughest crews, and it was close. That was pretty close race. and so I think we went into Harvard kind of cocky, um, and but I think the experienced guys in that boat deep down knew that that is like that's a race that you just don't win. Because they'd never had. Steve, the team captain, Steve Simcoe, never won against Harvard. And I think most of those guys, I don't think too many of them had a Harvard shirt. Um, because Harvard's program was just dominating. And then, and, and so going into that race, it was nerves, there was, everybody's got nerves, but then, when we got through the 1,000 and we were like neck and neck with Harvard and we're just slowly like taking a seat, slowly taking a seat, slowly taking a seat. And we had a 4 seat advantage on them going through the line. And I remember just being like, I rode, I would always race to the point of like blacking out. And I remember just like blacking out. I didn't know if we had won. I was like, what? I think we won, but Steve Simcoe knew that everybody else in the boat knew that we had won, and it was like this weird celebration that confirmed that the boat was a serious boat. It was like this thing. We just tackled our most fierce opponent. That we just the trophy that's like, it has a placard for every year. It has a placard of who won that boat. It's just like Harvard, 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 the Northeastern. I think you've got one of
72,
the yeah. And then I think Porty has a year in there, and it's just and then when we defeated Harvard, it was pivotal. You typically like you I apologize. Like you guys told me that I can't talk shit.
No,
Harvard,
we did.
they did not make.
We didn't say you
You
can't
did
talk
not
shit.
say you could.
So Harvard, they don't lose well. They're not. They did not. Who does? And they didn't. They didn't like that loss because they don't lose to anybody. They kill everybody on the river and they kill everybody. They're a dominant force. And so I never got my shirt from the guy, my 4 seat. He never looked at me. I think he actually threw it at me that year. And he didn't shake my hand. You bring the boats together,
Yeah.
didn't shake. And so it's I was like, these guys don't like us and they don't like losing to us. And okay, so we're that crew. And but then having that defeat, having that victory, propelled us going into the big races in the end of the season. Because now you kind of you've tested your boat, that crew in some lower threat environments and high threat environments. And in some crews we were visitors and sometimes we were home, so we felt comfortable wherever we went. So we could talk more about the end of that season, but that's kind of one of those are pivotal times that I remember very, very specifically, that we overcame those challenges to set the stage for the remainder of that year.
Scott, I will tell you, right? Like you said, Steve, you was in the bow, right? Bow seat always knows. They just always know. Uh, Whatever, you can. Us in the middle have no idea, right?
No idea. That's
Um,
right.
but and beating Harvard, it always had this aura of like it was like playing Tom Brady in the height of the Patriots. Like it was just really fun to see him mad. You know,
To
you
see,
and it was
yeah,
beating Harvard was like that. I mean, for me in my college career, you know, there was like the secret there was like this secret club because Princeton's Harvard race had MIT in it, And so there was like this secret club where it was like if you had an MIT shirt, it meant you beat Harvard. And so like there was like the secret club would wear the MIT shirt around, and you were like, oh, I know what that means. I know what that means.
That's so
Um,
that's epic. That's so
At
epic.
least you guys all had the opportunity. They they came to the San Diego Crew Classic once, either 1999 or 2000, and that was the era that they weren't coming to the IRA. So I never raced Harvard. I raced him in a final at San Diego. And
Yeah.
that was about it. I think that was it. They started coming back in 2003, I think, maybe. They started coming back to 2002, 2003 to the IRA.
Yeah, I forget.
But
Right
I
on that.
graduated, so
yeah.
yeah,
So-
never had the chance.
Wow.
All right, before we get
So
time
let's-
out.
It's your guys' fault.
Yes, it is. So, Scott, this is epic. I love the fact that we're ending on you describing beating Harvard, and to our Harvard friends that we know in the rowing world and beyond, like suckers, right? So we're gonna come back because there's more to this. There's more to your national team career, and we haven't even touched base on what you've been doing for the past 2 decades, which is keeping America safe. And so if you're willing, we'd love to have you back for a part 2, man. We'd be really excited to learn more about the Scott Fentress journey, and if this was just a taste of it. I can't wait to see what else you've been able to achieve, especially as someone who says that you're not special. So I can't wait to you to keep disproving that to yourself.
Shoulders of giants, my man. I'm with you guys. Like OQP, I'm going back to Lester Brown. I would be delighted. I'd be honored. I thank you, all of you guys, for putting this together. I mean, you're creating a magic, this gel in its own, which is a very special thing. And I think I'm privileged to be even considered to be among you, to be part of, and just to share kind of my perspective, how twisted it might be. So 100%, I'm on board with whenever you'd like me. I will make time. I will make time. Prioritize this. This is an investment. This is exactly what I think right looks like. So thank you guys for what it is that you do. This is it's a huge lift, especially if you have to listen to my dull storytelling. But we talk about that love, and so I appreciate you guys on a level that hopefully you'll understand someday. So
All right,
absolutely,
then
thanks, Dan.
Then we're gonna schedule it. We're gonna schedule it, man, and we will keep everybody else of the Mettle Factory family up to speed, and we're back, baby.
Outstanding. Thank you.
That's all for today's show. Fast Friends is a Mettle Factory production. All opinions expressed are our own and those of our guests. If you like our show, follow along or subscribe with us wherever you get your content and podcasts. Thanks for listening.